is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of DeFi Decoded. My name is Alex Tapscott, here with co-host Andrew Young. Andrew, we have spent a lot of time on the show talking about Web2 and the ways in which the incentives of the platforms are not always aligned with the incentives of users or of creators. And that's true in social media. It's certainly true in the world of financial services. And it's also true in artistic and creative fields too. Oftentimes, streaming platforms have different incentives than the artists who rely on them, for example. Now, one of the promises of Web3 is that user-owned services or user-owned platforms give creators not only an economic stake in the outcome of how those services are run, but also a say in how they're run, right? So, the idea that there's increased governance, and that might lead to a more equitable kind of model where user owners are all benefiting collectively together in a more sustainable way. And it's a really interesting idea, and it's played out at varying degrees of success across different kinds of industries. But one area where it's having quite a lot of success is actually in the music space, and specifically with this project called Audius. And we're very fortunate today because we're joined by Roneil Rumburg, who's the co-founder and CEO of Audius, which is a digital streaming service that connects fans directly with artists and exclusive new music. It's fully decentralized, owned and run by its vibrant open source community, which includes artists, but also fans and developers all around the world. It was founded in early 2018, and it already serves millions of users every month, making it one of the largest applications in the Web3 space that's really ever been built. I think I saw an article actually last fall by Decrypt that said there were 250,000 artists on the platform. Roneil's been in the space for a long time. He was the co-founder of Kleiner Perkins early stage seed fund, where he was responsible for seed investments into blockchain and AI companies, including Lightning Labs, which is pretty impressive. And he also attended Standford University and previously co-founded a Bitcoin peer-to-peer payment company called Backlash. So even before founding Audius, he's cut his teeth in a few different areas of this industry with some different kinds of companies. So we're pretty excited to have Roneil on the show. Roneil, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Alex. And excited to hop on. It's going to be fun.
Terrific. So what are you first and foremost? Are you a music fan or are you a crypto person?
Such a good question. I think first and foremost, I am a music fan. I was a drummer growing up, and played for many years, and spent a lot of time in and around music, even before I started learning about software engineering and whatnot, which is what ultimately led me to crypto. So I was music fan first, I think, just because crypto didn't exist then. But I think for me today, these are kind of equally sized areas of my life.
Terrific. And was that the thing that caused you to start Audius? Because you were in the space before. We often talk about how a lot of people who are in Web3 started off in Bitcoin because Web3 didn't exist, or this was before it entered the vernacular, but they were really drawn to something about peer-to-peer cash, or the idea of peer-to-peer finance. And I'm wondering, what was the progression for you from finding out about crypto and getting kind of orange pilled, so to speak, and then eventually kind of parlaying that or applying that to this passion of yours in the music space?
Totally. So I kind of first learned about and got excited about crypto from mining. I was in college at the time. I was studying computer science and spent a bit of time before that doing software engineering stuff. This is like circa 2012, 2013 or so. And a couple of my friends started a little mining operation, and I kind of joined on, and we were actually making decent money. I mean, nothing major, but enough to have a little beer money on the weekends, right? And I was like, I should actually learn a little bit more about where this money is coming from. And then that was what led me down this sort of crypto rabbit hole, if you will. I think I was it was fortunate for me to kind of stumble into crypto at the time that I did, because I was within computer science, my kind of area of specialization where I was spending most time was distributed systems, and the specific like kind of problem area and sort of proposed solution that Bitcoin provided to this Byzantine generals problem and the consensus mechanism were just very, very interesting. I mean, so different from academically the kind of things we were looking at in distributed systems, consensus. Where most consensus mechanisms rely on like a higher degree of trust between participants. So anyway, that was when I first got into things. Among that group, we all had a little bit of Bitcoin that we had earned from mining and started wanting to send it to each other and found it really hard and annoying to do that. The other thing that we used a lot in those days was Venmo to, pay each other back for dinner, that kind of thing. And that was what the idea for Backlash was. It was like, what if we could make a Venmo-like social experience around a Bitcoin wallet? Turned out like no one really wanted it. We grew to 25,000 or so users, but couldn't figure out how to grow past that. And this was in 2014, so very different time for the space, but was a hard lesson, but a good lesson in what you want isn't necessarily what the world wants, right? But yeah, after that, found my way over to Kleiner Perkins, and then it was there actually that I started to kind of understand a bit better, sort of, I guess, how to analytically think about business opportunities, but also specifically in the case of SoundCloud, got to understand a lot more and learn about a lot more about that business. And that was a product that was very near and dear to my heart in just my personal life, where that was where most of the music I was hearing was coming from. And seeing them go through the fall from grace that they did around late 2014 into 2015, that was where the initial idea for Audius came from. And I guess almost, in the same way that I stumbled into crypto and was very fortunate to have been spending time in distributed systems already and just happened to be interested in that. And that's what, that's why it was instantly exciting to me. I just happened to kind of learn about the business side of this and saw an opportunity to apply like the benefits of decentralization around users' sovereignty and everything else. We can get into that more soon, over to this set of problems that exist around music distribution. So the tools to build what we'd initially conceived of just didn't exist in 2015, right? Ethereum hadn't come out yet. We came up with this very like jacked up or kind of kludgy design for something resembling Audius that could run on Bitcoin using the like OP return field to like shove, it is a common technique that people use to like shove data into Bitcoin transactions. It's not supposed to be there. And I know the Bitcoin community gets very angry about that now, but at that time it was still like a socially acceptable thing to do, I guess. But we ended up deciding it was just too complex and scrapped it and walked away from the idea until 2 years later. My friend Forrest Browning, who was the one I'd kicked around that idea with in 2015, we kind of got back together and said, we wanted to work on something. I had left Kleiner recently. He had sold the company he started to an acquirer, and we revisited this idea of like the self-sovereign music distribution network. That's kind of how I described the early incantations of it, and ended up convincing ourselves it was possible to build in late 2017, the big kind of enabling technologies being Ethereum and IPFS, right? So Ethereum as a consensus layer to track, who shared what, when, who's authorized to edit what, that sort of thing. And then the actual content also needs to be able to be retrieved and manipulated, and IPFS gave us the means to do that. So in a decentralized context. So anyway, that was very long-winded, but that's how I just kind of stumbled sideways into it. And man, has it been fun over the last 5 years. It's just crazy that it's been that long, but.
Well, it's a great origin story, and we're looking forward to digging into Audius a bit more. I think it might be helpful, for the audience to maybe just take a step back and talk about how music consumption has evolved over time. There was a period when people used to go to the record store, the CD store, and actually buy music on a physical medium and pay money for that music. And there was a system where creators like writers and studio musicians and others would get paid royalties. It was never, most of the money, but it was always a fairly predictable amount. And then file sharing came around and basically, took this thing that was an asset, a thing that you bought at a store and sold as a physical medium, to something that was kind of a commodity that could be reprinted through the web, right? To the point where sort of marginal value was zero. And in a way that was sort of good for consumers, but bad for artists. And then we got the streaming platforms, and they were supposed to, kind of create some order and some rules around how we kind of consumed music online in a way that was supposed to deliver more value for artists and also a better user experience for people who are consuming the music. But they ended up sort of like re-intermediating themselves in a way that didn't benefit artists, and if anything, has harmed them even further. And a lot of I know this kind of somewhat from personal experience, because my father-in-law is a professional musician, and he also happens to be the chairman of the Screen Composers Guild of Canada. And so he represents thousands of different creators whose music appear in movies and TV shows. And they'll tell you that, like, whether it's the music deal that they're getting through Netflix or their music getting replayed on Spotify, there's a very little transparency. The royalty numbers seem to just be lower than they used to be. There's no real recourse for figuring out how they're getting paid or how it's being calculated. And they all just seem like they're kind of worse off than they were beforehand. So this is kind of where I'm approaching it from, which is that it's clearly an industry that has problems and is in need of solutions, right? And Web3 is holds immense promise and potential as a concept, but it'd be great to sort of drill down on what is the difference? Like, how is Audius different from Spotify, right? Like, there's probably people are just wondering, okay, it's a Web3 music streaming platform. It's owned by creators, developers, fans, and musicians. What does that look like? Like, what is the mechanics of that? Can you dig into that a bit?
Totally. So the short answer there is artist control, and that manifests itself in a number of different ways. But I think an illustrative example is, exactly the one that you mentioned, which is the way that streaming pays out royalties today is absolutely a black box, right? It's exactly. You get paid. You get a check that has a number on it. You don't really know where that number came from, why that was the case. You don't even know how long ago, oftentimes, the streaming and playback happened that generated that number. You're just getting a number, right? And you also have no capability to set or manage price or access any data that these marketplaces provide. And to your point, I think it's been streaming has not only been an amazing step forward for consumer usability. It's also, I think, arguably saved the music industry as we think of it from the financial side, from the problems of file sharing and piracy, right?
Yeah.
But it replaced, so it's not all bad, right? I think streaming really did move the ball forward in a big way, but it did create new problems that have, to what you said, put these marketplaces in a position of extreme control around how artists are able to monetize. So in Audius, the way this manifests itself is, as an artist, you own the relationships with your fans. You have absolute transparency and access to the entirety of the data those fans are generating in real time. You're getting paid in real time, and the provenance of those payments is entirely transparent and auditable and understandable by you. So, transparency is one piece of it, but I actually think the bigger and overarching thing that's important is that artist control, right? The ability to actually decide your own pricing, right? If you think you're not getting paid enough when folks listen to your content on one of the existing streaming services, on Audius, you can actually define rules around pricing that's acceptable to you. And you can define any sort of mechanisms you want around how that content can be unlocked. Maybe it's if the user has listened to your content more than like some number of times, right? They get to access your music. It doesn't even need to be financial, but the key there just being control.
Interesting. Andrew, do you want to hop in here?
Yeah, no, and I think one of the things, because we're obviously a DeFi podcast, but we sort of dive into everything. But one thing that was really cool is with Audius, it almost has its own sort of liquidity mining campaign, from what I sort of understand. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you guys have been able to sort of help bootstrap network effects around the platform? Using sort of tokenomics and all those types of things?
Yeah, totally. So the Audius token kind of underpins and powers the network and has three sort of core functions within that. It's securing the networks, the people who are actually hosting content, hosting metadata, they actually stake this token to be able to perform that service and then earn revenue back in exchange for those services. It grants access to features. So as an artist, if you stake or use a sufficient number of tokens, you access different feature tiers that consume more network resources. And then the third piece is governance. So the tokens actually control any and all code changes made to the network. And that kind of gets back to, I guess, the durability of that control point, right? Like I nor any other individual can just go change how Audius works on a whim. The community actually has to assent to that and is enfranchised in that. But Andrew, to get to your point specifically, the obvious problem created by a structure like this is how does that control of the network actually get distributed equitably among the stakeholders in the network, right? And you can actually use, at least we feel you can use the token economic structures that Audius has to almost create like self-fulfilling kind of sequences there, which is to say, like, if your usage of Audius is making Audius bigger, more valuable, more interesting, you should become, on a percentage basis, a larger and larger controller of governance power and, capability to do work, right? So where that becomes self-fulfilling is if the incentive is to do work for the Audius network to have more control of the network, like the people who have control of the network are the stakeholders that matter the most over time. So that's philosophically how this was approached. And the token supply actually inflationary. So that a significant segment of the proceeds of that inflation for the coming years are directed towards these incentive mechanisms and incentive programs. So these things are never perfect, but in an ideal world, you could actually say, user X's net contribution increased the value of the whole Audius network by like Y amount. They should actually get some, smaller percentage of Y back in the form of inflationary rewards. And that's like, you're actually growing the whole pie in a way that's like long-term sustainable there. So long as the rewards someone is earning in exchange for their activity from the network are, smaller on average than the amount of value they're contributing back. And it's worked really well with our community. They love it. At the time the Audius network launched, it had a few 100,000, monthly listeners. That is to say, there was a testnet version that had been running for a year that had grown to a few 100,000. Since that launch in October 2020, today this network's serving on the order of 7 million monthly fans and 250,000 artists. So the network formally launching and being fully decentralized from that point onward, in retrospect, was kind of a key inflection point for the growth of the Audius community.
And then, most dApps, or I'm not sure if you guys are sort of classified as a dApp really, but I mean, we sort of measure the daily user counts in the hundreds or thousands. So I'm curious, what has enabled you guys to grow to such a huge user base? From what I can see, Audius would be one of the biggest sort of crypto apps in the world by user base.
Yeah, there are a couple of folks that are still bigger than us. Like Brave Browser is I think the biggest, but we're really proud of where we're at, and you know, excited to nip at Brave Seals over time, and ultimately you know, step ahead if we can manage it. But you know, they're great folks, and they've built a great product. So I don't begrudge them any of their success. We're just excited and happy to be where we are. I think the biggest philosophical kind of you know, sort of positioning that helped us grow to that size was that we feel fundamentally that crypto and the tools of crypto and the products that are built in this space should be as accessible as possible to as broad an audience as possible. And as a result of that, a lot of user experience decisions and structures were built out to make the average Audius user like doesn't need to know there's any crypto here. They often aren't even aware that this is a decentralized product, right? Like this product is just doing a job for them, which is helping to distribute their content in the case of artists and engage their fans in cool ways. And then from the fan side, they're just coming because they're getting to hear exclusive content and like, you know, feel closer to the artists that they care about. So you know, crypto is an enabler. It's why Audius is able to provide these value propositions that it does, but we go as far out of our way as possible to actually hide the complexity that creates. And we, you know, I don't think there are a whole lot of others in crypto that have this same philosophy or mentality. We actually get flamed quite a lot for this fact because people see the growth of our user base as not necessarily beneficial for crypto broadly because these users aren't like being educated about how to use crypto native tools in the process of using Audius. And honestly, to that, I say like, it's not our job to grow the crypto ecosystem. It is our job to serve our users as best we can. And I think reducing friction and making our product easier to use for them, it should always be a superordinate goal to, you know, making crypto bigger. And maybe that's, you know, self-centered of us in our community. But I think that philosophy has served us well. It's let us, you know, build something that, you know, feels and looks like any traditional Web2 kind of product would.
It's interesting. It reminds me of this concept we've kind of bandied around, which is the idea of like a Web3 toolkit, where in a way, you know, there are all these things that you can dip into, right? You can say, okay, tokens are useful as a way to unlock services, right? Like token gating, or tokens are useful for governance, or tokens are a way to rank users based on their contribution and pay them out or whatever, like all these things. And but just because that is true doesn't mean that every element of what you're doing needs to be, you know, full Web3, I guess. You know, there are ways in which you can harness what's good about it and use other sort of off-the-shelf tools to create a user experience that's a little less intimidating. And then maybe, you know, down the road, I think a lot of things will become more decentralized over time, but already you guys are decentralized. But like the idea of you can dip into this toolkit and take what you need in order to, as you say, like serve your users better seems like a winning strategy. And I think it's something that is increasingly gaining traction, especially as more and more people from Web2 and from, you know, big companies and other parts of the tech industry come into the space and see what it's capable of and maybe what it's not. And what it's not right now, right? And I think that's sort of an interesting way to think about it. One of the things I want to understand just a bit better, and for our audience too, we've talked about how artists are your users, but you also have fans, and you also said developers, right? So can we talk a little bit about the latter two constituents? Because what's interesting is that obviously the platform is valuable because there's great talent on the platform, right? Like there's exclusive content coming from great artists. But if there's no one there to listen to that music or engage with those creators, then the platform is not valuable, right? So that the other side of it, even though you don't think of users of an application as being, important to its sort of valuation, they actually really are, right? And so I'm wondering, like, you mentioned that a lot of your users are interested in the platform because they want access to exclusive content from artists that they enjoy. But there's also this other component, which is if I'm going to use a service for something like that, I might as well, get to earn a piece of it if I'm actually creating value for it. And how important has that been for the user base? And then related, who are these developers? Can you just describe, like, what's the deal with developers? Thanks.
Yeah. So we really model Audius as a three-sided marketplace, and all three sides being developers, artists, and fans need to be healthy for this to function, right? And just like you said, if there are mismatches in the size of relative constituents, that's how you end up with an imbalanced market and with people being unhappy. Like if there are a lot of artists and no fans, all the artists would be like, no one's listening to my stuff and this is stupid, right? I'm wasting my time. Similarly, if the developer community, which we'd break down further into node operators, who are the folks that are actually running hosting services and indexing services on the Audius network. That's one constituent. The other constituent is folks actually building tools and features and things around the Audius ecosystem using the API and other things. Yeah. So we actually even subdivide that even further, but there's a specific set of value propositions, I think, given to each party. When the Audius testnet first launched in mid 2019, it was really just the artists that we were focused on, and it was sort of begging them to like try this thing, right? Because we were like, there are no users here. There's really no benefit to you using this, but like it might be cool, so you should try it. And that pitch actually worked surprisingly well. It's not like an economically rational pitch, but like artists love trying out new shit and like playing with it. And I think us showing
they're not
up,
economically rational.
Well, I guess like us just showing up and saying, hey, like, we want to get on a call with you and like learn more and that kind of thing. They were just really receptive to us being very open and kind of, unassuming in that interaction, right? We were just like, hey, like, we made a thing. If you want to try it, that's cool. If not, that's cool too. But like, we just really like your music. And like that, that tone actually worked well. So we started with bootstrapping, I guess what you would think of as supply first, which is artists sharing content. That supply ended up kind of like creating without really a lot of intervention or work on our part during the testnet period, a feedback loop on the fan side, which is typically once an artist finished uploading something, they were like, I have no followers here. This is a new network. How do I bootstrap my own following? They'd post like a social link to that content. So they'd post on Twitter, Instagram, and say, hey, like, I'm trying out this weird thing, Audius, like, try it out, right? Check out my music there. And that started to bring fans in. And then as the product improved and became more stable, those fans coming in became more sticky. So those fans would keep coming back, and then they'd listen to other people's content, not just the artists that brought them in. So they started to sort of cross-pollinate between them. So the fan community is the most difficult, I think, to understand, because you can't just talk to them in the same way that you can with like the artists and developers, right? I mean, I guess you can. It's just you're never going to get a representative sample given the scope of audience there, and the data they generate tells, I think, a more accurate, compelling story than talking to them. Anyway, so as the fan side grew, the motivation on the artist side did start to become, oh, there are fans on this thing, like I should, come here to try to reach them. And then you can see how those two would feed off of each other, right? Because as more artists come and share content, that would drive stickier and higher engagement from the fan side, which in turn would motivate more artists to come. So once the network was bootstrapped with artists and fans, that got things moving. Developers were a lot harder to bootstrap. So that's a whole different kind of realm. But and to put a finer point on who these people are, it's professional node operators. So think like Figment, Block Demon, Staked. There are these companies that exist in the crypto ecosystem that help provide basically that exist to earn revenue from the staking opportunities that a network like Audius puts forward, and that runs the gamut from like individuals or like sort of folks that showed up in the Discord a few years ago that have been running nodes for years and years, all the way up to that very professional end of the spectrum. And then there are the independent software developers. So Audius is an open network, right? The Audius client that you see at audius.co is not the only way to interact with the network, because anyone can build their own interface to it. And a lot of people have. So some of those are integrating Audius into existing products. So like games, for example, and a handful of other use cases in that vein that just want to be able to provide an additional dimension to their user experience. And it tends to be hard to find music that they can use in that context, but Audius can provide that kind of benefit for them. And then it's also people building tools specific to the Audius network. So like people have built various like analytic tools. There's this product Soundstage that's kind of like a metaverse-y live listening experience that's built around the Audius catalog. So yeah, it's kind of all over the place, but the motivations for that category are so all over the place. We really haven't been able to pin down like a precise user story that I can speak to developers for. It's really more like 5 or 6 like niche categories of developer, with the node operator category being the most well defined, right? Because that's a very straightforward, like, you stake this amount, you run a node, and like here's how the reward mechanism works. It's like a purely kind of economic kind of interaction in that lens. But for the folks that are integrating the catalog in different ways, their motivations are all over the place. It's a lot of fun trying to understand, but it's more generally, like trying to understand a thing that like you had a hand in building is pretty bizarre, right? Because I think like no one really, I certainly don't understand the full mechanics of our ecosystem anymore. I don't think anyone can or does. It's so you try to like learn from your users and learn from what's happening and serve them as best you can.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one thing that we talk a lot about on this podcast is all the different chains that are coming online. I know you guys are sort of abstracting away a lot of the crypto element, but from what I can tell, you're on Ethereum mainnet right now. Are you looking to go sort of cross-chain at any point? And I'm just curious to hear like which chains specifically look exciting to you.
It's a great question. So we actually run on a mix of Ethereum mainnet and Solana right now. So the Solana side of Audius went live about a year and a half ago or so. So all of the tipping, for example, you see in the product, which are these small peer-to-peer payments, basically, and higher volume things run on Solana. The things that run on Ethereum are primarily for legacy reasons, but like the staking system, which is folks staking Audius tokens to run nodes and earning rewards from that and things of that nature, and then governance, because that ties into the token. So yeah, there's sort of this split. And to your question of do we see Audius being multi-chain, I would say certainly yes, in the same way that like, a traditional Web2 product runs on multiple databases and data providers, right? Like Redis and Postgres solve very different things for like a Web2 application, and they can coexist and provide value alongside of each other. We see the world around crypto being the same, where there will not be like a one size fits all kind of approach that makes sense for everyone. I think we're going to just see further and further fragmentation of different categories targeting different use cases. The thing I don't have a good understanding of is how the friction of that increasing fragmentation and complexity at the user level resolves itself. Bridges have a lot of issues. So do various like cross-chain communication mechanisms. The way we've squared that circle at Audius is there's this node category called discovery nodes that the community run that index the metadata being generated both at the Solana level and the Ethereum mainnet level, and IPFS for that matter. So that node type exists, in one part to make it easy to query this data set. So you can as a user, your client on Audius can ask a question like, what tracks did deadmau5 upload last week, and actually get a structured response to that question instead of like having to crawl through all the data. But the benefit that approach has had for us is that discovery node abstracts the complexity that sits a layer beneath it at the layer ones, right? So the user, and the client even don't have to know that certain data settles in one place versus another place. But that doesn't apply to other user categories or product categories as neatly, especially like DeFi kind of use cases, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how that resolves itself. But certainly from our lens and perspective, we see the future being multi-chain.
That also seems to align with what you were saying earlier about creating a user experience and almost being like agnostic in a way to like the chain that's behind it, so long as it works and enhances the experience for the end user, right?
You got it.
Interesting. Well, this has been a very enlightening conversation, Roneil. I think we covered some stuff even that we didn't cover the last time you and I chatted. So really grateful for your time and insights. We're really looking forward to seeing what comes next for you guys. Maybe if we could just finish with one final question. What does come next? Like where do you go from here? You've already had, as we've described it, sort of a lot of initial success for a Web3 application, but compared to Spotify or Facebook or Netflix in terms of subscriber count, we're still so early. So where do you see the future going?
Yeah, so great question. I think to date, Audius has been a fantastic place to build an audience as an artist. It's not yet a great place to make money from your fans. And that's the key kind of area of focus for our community over the next 1 year, 18 months, is rolling out a variety of different tools and kind of structures that artists can use to charge and gate access to things at the fan level to create, further kind of this goal of providing a unique experience to their fans, right? Super fans have already shown themselves to be very, ready, willing, and excited to use Audius when they're getting exclusive content back from the artists that are on Audius, right? So the type of content that does really well on Audius is not like people uploading the same things they upload to the other streaming services. And that's also why I think so far the network, has not been head-on competitive with Spotify and others. Were serving sort of a different use case. Doubling down on that to say, well, I have all these super highly engaged fans that are coming here just to listen to like my work in progress that's releasing a few months from now and is not even mastered yet and not complete. Like, what more can I offer them? And then as I offer them more and more, I can, ideally charge them for access to these things. So tipping and other mechanics are already live. It's sort of like putting these puzzle pieces together to create a more cohesive paid experience for fans. So that's the key focus for the upcoming year, and really excited to kind of head down that direction. And otherwise, it's always continuing to grow, continuing to be bigger, serve more artists, and increase everyone's engagement with this network and with this ecosystem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's a laudable goal. One of the things that I think about a lot is how do we value culture, and what is the price of it? Like how much is it worth, right? And I think life without art and music is almost like without meaning in a way, right? Like it's otherwise it's just all work and so forth. So like we know that music and art and creativity provide so much value, but like it's a chronically underpaid industry in a way. And it's not like Web3 tools are going to fix this problem. For millennia, artists have served at the pleasure of wealthy patrons, or in a way, like almost the 20th century is kind of like this weird golden age for creators in a sense, because you had this mechanism where they got paid royalties from the sale of physical units of music, which there wasn't before. The record didn't exist, right? And now we're on this new kind of economic and cultural frontier, and we've got this new toolkit, right, to try and figure out how we balance the scales or figure out new ways, and it's not like, there's a debate, right? Are creators getting paid less than they were before? Are they getting paid the same? Should they get paid more? How does that work? Like who's paying, who's doing the paying, and so forth? And I don't know the answer to it. You did allude to super fans or like power users, right? Like there is the potential that there's a way to generate revenue from the long tail, but as with anything, like your most diehard fans or users or whomever can be the ones that create the most value for creators. I think that probably between NFTs and governance tokens and all the different toolkits, like tools that we have, we've got new creative ways to connect fans to creators to make sure that they get paid more, and then in a way enriches the fan experience, because maybe the super fan wants to have an early recording of deadmau5's thing as an NFT to say that they had it before it went on to become, a Billboard hit, right, as a finished product or something like that. So it's very much like a creative tabula rasa in a way. We can kind of think of new ways to program it. So anyway, it's inspiring. So thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for joining us. It's been a great discussion. And we'd love to have you back again, I don't know, 6 months, a year from now to do an update, because it's such a great conversation. That's it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. We will see everybody next week. As we said on the last episode, there are great guests. I think today delivered, and there's many more to come. So please stay tuned. Thanks.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.